Welcome back. So today was the opener for the upper division of this year's DPC. We got to see just a few of the teams in the upper division, just a few regions. I believe only two teams or two different regions participated today, at least in the upper division. And, it was really refreshing to see some of these teams finally play again. It's been a long time since we've seen them play in a DPC format, specifically some of the ones that hadn't attended TI. And I gotta say, it was really refreshing. So I'm going to be working my way through this list, starting off with the upper division matches in order in which they were played, and then doing the same thing for the lower division matches, which means I'm going to be starting off with Tundra versus Alliance. This was one that I was favoring Tundra in. I had mentioned before, especially in these past few days, how I think this is really Tundra's tour to shine. They're a team that has stuck together for quite a while now. They had a very, very good run in the back half of last season, especially near those TI qualifiers where they made it to the grand finals, but they just couldn't quite beat OG. And, that's no small feat, beating OG, the defending champions at the time. There's no real shame in losing to them there. But notably, they did show a lot of promise. They were one of the strongest teams at that time, and they were one of the only teams that actually stuck together. And so with that strength combined with some of the other teams that, have had pretty big roster shakeups in the region, like Team Secret, Team Liquid, OG, stuff like that, even Alliance, the team that they played against today, I thought that they would really have a jump start over it. And I gotta say, Tundra was really impressive today. They're really sort of backing up that notion that, yeah, these guys are going to be one of the best teams in this region, at least for this first tour. Of course, we're only one series deep in the tour so far, but they picked the same lineup against Alliance twice, and they demolished them with it twice. Second game was a little bit closer, but it was a really, really well done series by Tundra. So the first game, this is obviously Alliance's first game with this new roster, at least in an official setting. And Tundra drafted an insanely fast-paced draft. They had a position 5 gyro, which is something that was popularized quite a while ago. But they're still going with it today. It gave them a lot of flexibility in the draft, as well as a mid-Earth Spirit, which they had picked into a Shadow Fiend, which, if you've ever played mid as a melee hero against a Shadow Fiend, you know that it's pretty miserable. And it kind of was until he had some support rotations in come early. They got an early kill on that Shadow Fiend, and the game just spiraled out of control so quickly. Tundra just did not give Alliance any space. We had Nico Baby playing on his Wraith King, and the Tundra lineup was one that was very, very ready for the late game, even though they were able to have an insanely fast pace early. They had, the Doom and the Earth Spirit to secure the early game, get a lot of DPS, start pressuring towers and heroes and stuff, while still having the late game security of a Faceless Void, while also having, like I mentioned earlier, the Doom. So Alliance really didn't have an opening in this game. They could have maybe itemized for an early timing. I know some of the casters in this game, at least on the English side of things, were mentioning that maybe Nico Baby could go for like an Armlet Blink Deso type build on his Wraith King. However, he opted for a Radiance build. In both games, he played Wraith King. Rather than taking the tempo to them, he tried to outfarm them. And yeah, Tundra just outpaced them. It got to the point where even though they had a Faceless Void versus Wraith King, like he didn't mind chronoing the Wraith King ever. He could just kill him twice regardless. And I gotta say, this was a super, super clean series from Tundra. Again, game 2 was a little bit closer. They had the exact same draft, so Alliance made a few adjustments, but overall it just wasn't enough. I am super excited to see Tundra play, especially after the next series that I'm going to be talking about here. Tundra might be in the running for first place in this division, which I was not expecting at all, but they are a very strong team. So they move up to 1-0 on the series. Alliance dropped to 0-1. Of course, Alliance has another series later this week against Team Secret, and both of those teams, obviously, I'm going to be getting to the next one, lost their first series. So one of them is going to end up 1-1, and the other one's going to end up 0-2. And starting off 0-2 in a tour that only has 7 games, not exactly the strong start you might be looking for. So the MVP for the series for me, it really could have gone to any of the members of Tundra, really, but if I had to pick one, it had to be 33. He had a fantastic series. He played Doom in both games. He finishes with a KDA of 17-0 and 36. He didn't die in either of the games, had 17 kills and 36 in both of them, which, funny enough, that in itself is part of 53 kills. That is just barely half of the kills that Tundra got in this series. The total kill score in the series were 88-23. It was a very one-sided series. So again, excited to see how well Tundra is able to do and if they're able to hold this up. And for Alliance, they have another series this week. They're going to have to start preparing for that one. Moving on, OG versus Secret, and wow, this was quite the opposite of what I think I and a lot of people were expecting. Team Secret came into this one with a very strange draft. It really looked like they were just kind of almost, I don't want to say clowning on OG a little bit. I'll tell you their draft if you missed the game. Starting from position 1 all the way to 5. Terrorblade, things start off pretty normal. Terrorblade's a carry hero. How could it get any weirder? Grimstroke mid on Sumail. Ice 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 Winter Wyvern off lane. Yapsor Pudge in the position 4 role, so traditional, but a Pudge. And then a position 5 Weaver, which we've seen quite a bit of, usually in the position 4 role, but yeah, this was a rough game. ATF, or Amar the Fucker, was playing his Timbersaw, and it was like the most free Timbersaw game ever. He carried this game pretty damn hard. I mean, again, this is another series that pretty much everyone on the team of OG had a fantastic series, but I just noticed that ATF was just kind of playing on another level for a while. He was playing with a lot of confidence, and for a team as young and as new as OG is, they were playing with a lot of discipline. This is not the type of team that you'd expect as a bunch of young new rookies, especially playing against a team like Secret, which is maybe why they were playing with so much discipline. Team Secret being projected to be the strongest team in this region. But yeah, this was just a very, very well executed game 1, taking advantage of the super weird and clunky draft that Team Secret had. I mean, Sumail on the mid Grimstroke, it didn't look good at any point in the game. It just looked like whenever he showed himself in a fight, he was just already dead. He couldn't even cast any spells. So super weird there. So heading into game 2, Team Secret goes for a more traditional draft. They kind of get things back on pace a little bit. But again, OG just kind of handled the game. They had a safe lane Templar Assassin with the mid Ember, which is actually something we saw more than once today. And yeah, every time Team Secret tried to do anything, like this Templar Assassin was just so huge. She was able to 1v2 her lane at certain points, like they just couldn't kill her. And so she just got super, super farmed. She just did way too much damage. Team Secret just couldn't withstand the damage. And this game, again, goes the way of OG. So they take this series 2-0. A very, very impressive series for OG. One that makes me think that I was probably underrating, and I'm sure a bunch of other people were maybe underrating this new OG roster. This could be a mix of a few things. Like I said, Team Secret really didn't look like they themselves here. This is a new roster. They did bring in Sumail and Ice Ice Ice. It's a pretty big shakeup here. But I can't take away from the fact that this was just a fantastic series from OG. So, yeah, it's Team Secret, like I mentioned earlier, another series later on this week against Alliance. They're going to be looking at that one and hopefully get their season balanced out to a 1-1 score. As of right now, they dropped to 0-1, and OG goes up to 1-0. And again, my MVP of the series, Amar the Fucker. Fantastic series. Timbersaw in game 1 and Mars in game 2 was just killing it today. And again, this could have gone to any of the cores or any of the players on OG, but I just thought ATF in particular played very, very well. All right, next up we have Quincy Crew versus Simply TooBased. This was the last upper division match of the day. This is one that I was very, very heavily favoring Quincy Crew. Quincy Crew, of course, being one of the better teams in North America. They are projected to finish at least in the top half. I know with some of the changes that I'm just saying that because of how many changes that they did make to the roster, but realistically they should be a top 3 team at least. Whereas Simply TooBased, I really wasn't really impressed with the changes that they made to the roster. This isn't exactly a team that had the best season last time, and it looks like they really downgraded their roster. And for game 1, they actually had Mason standing in position, playing position 1. Ryoya was actually missing for game 1, and he played a safe lane Viper. I'm assuming he picked it because they had a Tidehunter on the team. But this was a pretty rough game. This was a pretty handily beat down. Because of the fact that they had a stand-in, Lil Nick was supposed to be an offlaner on this team, and he is an offlaner on this team, but because of the fact that they needed a stand-in to play carry, he actually ended up getting bumped to mid, where he ended up playing against Quinn, which of course Quinn is one of the most technically sound mid laners in the region, if not the world. And that was just a beatdown. Quinn had a field day playing against him. Lil Nick ends up 1-7 in that game on his Void Spirit. Now, the Void Spirit Ember Spirit matchup is not traditionally Void Spirit favored, but this was a beatdown, and Quinn was just really styling on them here. So game 2, Ryoya comes back. Mason obviously gets the boot for that one, but it really didn't seem to matter. This game also was just kind of Quincy Crew favored for the most part. Again, Quinn kind of just owning on his mid Leshrac. And it really just didn't look like at any point TooBased was going to find their way back into this series. So Quincy Crew takes this one 2-0, as they likely should have. They go up to 1-0 on the season. Simply TooBased start off 0-1. Again, they're not going to have any more games this week, at least for Simply TooBased, so they're going to have some time to readjust, maybe practice a little bit more. For Quincy Crew, they actually do have another series this week, and it's going to be against 4 Zoomers, so it's going to be a little bit more of a challenge. We'll have to see how it goes for Quincy. Now moving on to our lower division matches. So of course China having only lower division matches until the new year, so there's going to be quite a few Chinese games going on pretty much every single day of the week. Today there were 3 matches, which is more than any other region, and there were some pretty good games, pretty good series here. So first off, starting with YBB versus Neptune. Of course, Neptune has 4 series this week, so they're getting more than half of their season out of the way in just the first week. They lost their first series, and they're looking for a little bit of a bounce back. And I gotta say, it kind of looked like they were going to get that. Game 1, they were off to a very, very solid start. However, it doesn't take very much for them to end up losing this. They control the game very, very well for the first 20 or so minutes. They get a nice Roshan, they try and go high ground, and they just kind of overextend a little bit. Their hard carry Luna ends up dying on the high ground, and from there, they just aren't really able to regroup fast enough, as when the Luna respawns, YBB just runs right at them and takes a really, really good fight at the top half of the map. And from there, the game just kind of spirals out of control, and Neptune, this one just slips away from them. So that's a little bit disheartening, as they lose a game that they likely should have won, or were in a very good position to win, one that was very important to them because, of course, like I mentioned, they lost their first series of this week. So yeah, and funny enough, another scenario where the winning team drafts pretty much the exact same thing. That's pretty much what YBB did. The only thing different was, rather than having their mid player, who is named Storm, not to be confused with the hero Storm Spirit, his name is Storm, not to be confused with Stormer. He played Razor in game 1, and then in game 2 he played Death Prophet. But the rest of the roster and lineup was the exact same. They had Dawnbreaker, Nyx Assassin, Troll Warlord, and Bat Rider. And yeah, this was a fantastic one. One thing I should mention is that Nevermind was actually standing in for Dolem again in this series, and he was standing in for them in Neptune's first series as well. He was playing position 3, and I thought he had a really good game 1. He was playing Legion Commander. He got a lot of really, really good Blink duel initiations. He was really a standout player, and a big reason of why Neptune had a huge lead in game 1, but his game 2 was pretty rough here, as YBB just pretty much took full control of this game. I gotta say, Lou was fantastic throughout the series. Again, he played Troll Warlord in both games here, and even in game 1 when they were falling behind, Neptune never really had a gold lead. Even when they were sieging high ground, they were only like ahead by 1k gold, because Lou was just farming up a storm over here. And by the time it was time for him to come in and fight, he just destroyed team fights, and it was impossible for Neptune to deal with him. So overall, a fantastic series for YBB. They come back in game 1, and then they come back and beat him again in game 2 with pretty much the same draft. YBB goes up to 1-0 on the season so far, and now Neptune, they are starting off their season 0-2. They've got 2 more series this week. They need to win these series. Upper division contention is starting to run a little thin for them, you know, with 2 series losses already. It's very unlikely that they finish top 2 unless some other teams are maybe tie with them for top 2. Now it's about not finishing near the bottom of the of the region. So getting these next few wins is going to be crucial for Neptune. So yeah, best of luck there. Now moving on to Sparking Arrow Gaming versus Shenzhen. Of course, Sparking Arrow Gaming was off to a pretty solid start. Yesterday, actually, when they had their first match, they went 1-0 on the season so far. They are, of course, the team coming in from the upper division, who had a pretty miserable time in that upper division, but they're looking to get a little bit of a bounce back here in this lower division. And they started off really strong. Game 1 was really, really Sparking Arrow Gaming favored. They were off to a strong start. They actually picked an off-lane Faceless Void for Flyby, which at the time of the draft and even throughout most parts of the game, it looked really questionable. I know a lot of the casters were kind of talking about, you know, this is kind of why we don't see Faceless Void off-lane so much. You know, he has such a long cooldown. But man, whenever he had that chrono, he utilized that. The Snapfire Mortimer Kisses in combo with it, it was just a fantastic game for these guys. Son Goku on that Snapfire had a fantastic game. He was just kind of owning. And Sparking Arrow Gaming looking for their second series win in 2 days. Looking to go 2-0 on the season so far, but this is a 3-game series, and Shenzhen strikes back in game 2. They get off to a really, really strong start. It is, however, a pretty close game. Throughout the mid-game, Sparking Arrow Gaming actually takes the first Roshan. And they actually use that Roshan quite effectively. They get some nice pickoffs, they go for a gank, but it's one of those ganks that they have with Aegis that they end up overextending just a little bit too far, and Shenzhen takes advantage of that and they punish them really hard. And from there, they lose some crucial heroes, and Shenzhen is able to snowball the game out of control. So again, Sparking Arrow Gaming was in position to take the series 2-0, and they just kind of made some tier 2 Dota mistakes. They overextended on a few ganks, got a little bit too greedy, and suddenly the series is tied 1-1, and Shenzhen would punish them even more heading into game 3. This was a stomp. Shenzhen kind of just destroyed them in this one. It really wasn't that close. I think Ash had a fantastic series for Shenzhen. He, of course, is their mid laner. He played Ember Spirit in that second game, I believe, and just owned. In the 2 games that they ended up winning, he actually went 33 and 39. He notably had a pretty bad KDA, and pretty much everyone did in that first game. Again, Sparking Arrow Gaming kind of really handled them in game 1. But yeah, Ash had himself a hell of a series after that first game, and he's my MVP for this one for sure. So yeah, next up, heading into the last of the 3 series that we had in China today, we have Magma versus CDEC. So of course, Magma off to a strong start of the season. They won their series yesterday. They're looking to go up 2-0 today. And CDEC looking for a bounce back. They lost their first series, of course, against Sparking Arrow yesterday. They're looking for a bit of a bounce back. It doesn't end up going their way. Game 1, Magma has a fantastic Bloodseeker pick. They have an off-lane Bloodseeker played by TXY up against a safe lane Ember Spirit, up against an off-lane Pangolier. It was really just an impossible game for these guys, as it seemed like every time they tried to make a rotation, they would go just a little bit too far. They get hit with the Rupture, and he just cleans up. TXY really just had a fantastic game here. It was still a pretty close mid-game, but again, it's those just slight overextensions by CDEC or CDEC that just gets capitalized on by Magma. Fantastic one. And even though CDEC throughout this mid game, like I mentioned, is able to take some good trades, get a few pickoffs, they're just always behind on golden XP just because of the fact that they're losing in the gold trades, because of just the fact that they're able to come in and clean up on the side of Magma. And it's just one really bad team fight where the safe lane Ember Spirit kind of used all of his remnants in and try and burst one of the heroes, and he just goes in, doesn't kill anything, and then all of a sudden he has no way to get out, and that just ends up being a really costly fight for them. And so Magma takes game 1. In game 2, CDEC gets off to a really strong start in all of their lanes. But again, they're just diving a little bit too deep. They're getting a little bit too greedy, a little bit too early. It was about like the 15-16 minute mark, and they were diving the tier 2 mid tower, and eventually you're just going to get punished a little bit. This time, it's TXY playing his Pangolier, a hero that's been pretty popular this past couple days. Still one of those heroes from TI that is getting picked up quite a bit. And it seems to be the Blink Dagger build that's really popular. You just start your roll, you blink in, get that nice initiation on the hero that you want, and exactly what TXY did every single time. Anytime CDEC tried to make any sort of rotations, he was just always there with the quick TP roll, the quick blink in with the roll, getting all those stuns. And I think, in my opinion, TXY was the MVP of the series. Again, his play with the Bloodseeker and his rolls with the Pangolier and his counter rotations and his initiations. Yeah, this was a fantastic series for him. Magma takes this one 2-0. They go 2-0 in the season so far, so looking like one of the front runners for the upper division slot. CDEC, again, one of these other teams, drops 0-2 to start. They're going to have some work to do if they want to get themselves out of that hole. Finally, ending off with our 2 last series here, starting off in Western Europe, we have Team Bald making their debut. Of course, that is Gork and the boys. They're up against No Bounty Hunter. And notably for this series, they had Zip Zapper filling in for on Team Bald for Rajik's playing position 3. I thought he had a pretty good series. He had some notably pretty impressive plays, I will say. And, you know, it's always nice when a player misses a game that they can know that their team didn't get destroyed because they were missing. So I think Zip Zapper had a pretty solid performance here. I was actually kind of keeping him maybe in contention for my MVP of the series, but I ended up giving it to Pablo, and I'll start getting into that. Both of these games were pretty close to start. A lot of early fighting, a lot of back and forth fight trading. But at the end of the day, it's just these big late game team fights that just kind of turns things around. Notably, one of the fights in game 1, the 2 teams were smoked. They kind of smoked into each other. Excalibur is right in the front lines on the low ground, gets jumped and bursts right away. And even though No Bounty Hunter gets this brilliant initiation on Team Bald's mid laner, they still lose 3 heroes and they lose the fight, which is huge. Team Bald really has some nice team fight coordination there, and it's really off the back of that fight that they end up winning this game. Notably, in this game, Pablo was playing his support Hoodwink, and the amount of times that this guy was just hitting these crazy bushwhacks, he was hitting multiple heroes very often and just, sniping people with his sharpshooter ultimate. Fantastic game for Pablo. In game 2, I wouldn't say Pablo necessarily had as strong of a showing, but he was still playing pretty solid. He was on the Staffire. He was always there with the 4-staff saves for any of his cores when they needed it. Again, this was a very brawl-heavy game and a lot of back-and-forth team fights, and eventually in the late game, it's Team Ball that wins the fights that matter. Eventually, they just sort of start winning the late game fights. No bounty hunter is forced to make some late game buybacks, which never feels good. And Ball capitalized on that, and they win this one 2-0. Strong start for Ball. I gotta say, it wasn't exactly a very commanding start to their season, but it's a 2-0 nonetheless, and it's a series win for them there. So I'm sure they're gonna be super happy with this. Again, Pablo is my MVP for this one. I think he's my only support MVP on this whole board. I apologize for any support players out there who feel like you lack recognition, but I really thought Pablo had a fantastic series here, especially his game 1. And now, finally, ending things off with North America Lower Division, where we had E-Boys versus Team Magnus. Of course, Team Magnus being one of the new teams coming in from those open qualifiers. E-Boys has been in the lower division last season, looking to get off to a good start. And they do. Game 1, it looks very solid. Notably, Speed has a fantastic game. Of course, you may recognize Speed from Game Leap. He makes a lot of Dota content. Very solid start. He was playing the Slardar off lane. He popped off. He really was commanding his team. They got off to a really strong start. They just start snowballing kills. Typical Slardar lineup type thing where the Slardar just gets so big, he just blinks in, crushes, and by the time you get tracked, you're already dead. So E-Boys with a clean game 1. But then game 2, 2 minutes in, a pause happens, and the hard carry of Electronic Boys, who is Murdoch, disconnects, and he doesn't come back. The game is paused for 10 minutes or so. They are talking about whether or not he's going to come back. We know that he's playing from a different country because he is from Brazil, and this is a North American server, and he does not return to this series. So notably, Electronic Boys had to play this entire game 4v5. And there were some highlights for Electronic Boys. I'm convinced that if they had a 5th player, they probably would have had a good chance at winning this game just by the way that they were playing with only 4. Notably, the position 5 Ogre that was playing support for the first 2 minutes ended up being a carry and built a Midas. It was kind of funny. He kept killing people with his Ignite. It was kind of hilarious. But at the end of the day, you can't really win a game 4v5, at least in competitive Dota. And yeah, Magnus just gets a lucky break and they win this one, and they would take that win and they would build on it in the next game as they would get enough momentum to end up taking game 3. Game 3 in this series was insane. This game was so back and forth, so much team fighting, like all the time. You really didn't know who was going to win until the very end. It ends up being Team Magnus, but it could have easily gone either way. It never really felt like either team was really taking off of the lead. I mean, at like 40 minutes in, there wasn't even a net worth lead like for either team. It was pretty ridiculous. Fantastic game if you want to check out a really fun back and forth game. I would really recommend that one. They of course still did not have Murdoch in this game for Electronic Boys. So again, would this series have gone differently if he was here? Who knows? But I had to give my MVP to Mark, who obviously is the mid laner for Magnus. Well, I shouldn't say obviously. They're a new team, new player. I thought he had a really fantastic series. Even in the game that he lost when he played Queen of Pain, he was one of the strongest heroes on his team. He was really leading the charge a little bit. And in the 2 games that they won, his Queen of Pain and his Void Spirit were scary. They were to be reckoned with. And I think he had a very impressive series. And yeah, that's my reasoning for giving it to him. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching my review. I'm going to be having another review for all the series posted up tomorrow. So if you don't want to miss that, feel free to subscribe. And I will talk to you guys tomorrow with another video. Bye.